Good morning, everyone. Sorry, maybe. Yeah. Now, do you see the presentation? Yes, no, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Of course. Perfect. Good morning, everyone. My name is Cristina Campos, and I am a PhD student in the University of Cantabria. First of all, I am pleased to attend to this conference. And my work is called Tourism and Sustainable Waste Management, the case study of the Camino Lebaniego in Cantabria in Spain. Okay, so first of all, I would like to explain you my short biography. I am a chemical engineer and currently I am studying the research teaching staff. I am in my first year of the doctoral thesis in the framework of the project Green Tour, Circular Economy and Sustainable Tourism in Destinations of the Pseudo-Space. So I am working, as you say, in the Department of Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering in the University of Cantabria in Spain. Here is my place where I work, and this is my group, my DEPROS group, that we are responsible of the development of chemical processes and pollutant control. So in which field we move? We move in the sustainability field and the life cycle analysis of the processes and products. And concretely, I am working now in the tourism process. So with this introduction, I would like to show you the table of contents. First of all, an introduction of the case of study that I present you, and the introduction of the life cycle analysis methodology that is I use in this work. Then I present the cases of study, the results and discussion that I obtained, and finally I would like to show you the conclusions, the more important conclusions that it is important to highlight. So, okay, tourism. The tourism is one of the most important industries in the global economy, whose forecast for the coming years predict this trend is increasingly a lot. So, about the social and economic point of view, the world tourism generates billion-dollar industry. So it corresponds with the 7% of the world exports. Transport is the main contributor to the climate change, and it is about the environmental point of view. The 8% of the CO2 emissions in 2013 are due for the tourism. And it is estimated that 4 times more now in the future if we continue to this type of activity, to this type of tourism. So this trend was interrupted by the COVID-19. So about the social and economic point of view, more or less 100 to 120 million direct tourism jobs were at risk. It was a loss of $1 billion, a loss of the GDP. So about the social and economic point of view, it was awful due to the tourism, but it's true that about the environmental point of view, this is so positive. Why? Because the 7% of the reduction in greenhouse gases emissions were due to the tourism. Why? Because due to the mobile restrictions, it was impossible to travel. So it was a positive point. So with this introduction, I would like to show you that tourism has been identified by the United Nations Environmental Programme as one of the 10 economic sectors capable of contributing to the transition to a sustainable and inclusive green economy. So there are different types of tourism depending on the intention of the tourist, related work, leisure tourism, health tourism, and finally the religious tourism. So we are focused on this type of tourism that the World Association of Religious Tourism estimates that more or less 300 million people worldwide participate in this type of tourism. So there are 6 main Christian pilgrimage destinations, such as Jerusalem, Rome, Santiago de Compostela, Camino Lebaniego, Caravaca de la Cruz, and La Mecca. So we are focused in this. That is one of these 6 main Christian pilgrim destinations. And this Camino is here in Cantabria, in the north of Spain. Okay. What is the goal of this case study? The goal of this work is to examine the environmental impacts generated by these religious and tourist routes that is so known in the north of Spain. Okay, what is the problem? The problem is that every tourist activity generates an environmental impact that must be evaluated. And some activities more than others, but it's true that every tourist activity generates this impact. So what can we do? So we can try to achieve good practice and environmental agreements with pilgrims and every entity involved in this type of tourism. The measures involve environmental, social, and economic point of view. With all this, we are able to build a sustainable development of the tourism sectors. The solution may be to use some tools such as the life cycle analysis in order to perform these impacts and to study, to assess, and to propose improvements measures. So with all this, I would like to explain you some about this type of methodology that is so known now. Okay, the life cycle impact assessment methodology. The objective of this method is to study all stages, each stage of the product or process, in this case, the tourism, since the material extraction until end of life. We are include material extraction, manufacture, packaging, the use at the end of life. And we are able to have a solution in each stage and which impacts are due to the material extraction, manufacture, use, for example. So, what is some advantages that is capable to study several impact categories, not only climate change, but it's not so common for the tourism system. So it's a novel methodology for a perspective in the world, but it's true that because of the lack of data in the study and some things more, we are focused only in the climate change, but it's based in this method, in the life cycle impact assessment. So to assess the CO2 emissions of tourism, we are used the carbon footprint, and in the Camino Lebaniego, that is our case of study, and then we are focused in the hostel. Why hostels? Because normally the majority of the studies are focused on hotels, on another type of accommodations, but hostel is so novel, in the literature. So it's a good point in order to improve this type of studies. Okay, with all this, we are focused. We are here. Okay, this is Spain, so we are here in Cantabria, and this is the Camino Lebaniego. Cantabria is the only region in the Christianity world that includes two pilgrim routes, Camino Norte and Camino Lebaniego. Camino Norte is Camino de Santiago. Okay, so since the Middle Ages, there is a lot of pilgrims that flock into the monastery of Santo Toribio in order to visit the Lignum Crucis and the remains of the saint. But with all this, we are focusing in this hostel, in Cádiz hostel. Why? Because the rest of the hostels were not have a lot of data, and because of the lack of data, we consider only these hostels. So tourism impact can be from restaurants, accommodation, transport, and tourism activity. But we only focus in accommodation and food and drink. So this is our subsystems under study. Okay, so the carbon footprint. We need to define the goal and scope firstly, then the boundaries and assumptions. In the third point, the accurate life cycle inventory, and finally the life cycle impact assessment. So what is the goal? The goal is to reduce the environmental impact of the hostels in this route. Then the function. The function will be the overnight stay for a pilgrim in a hostel with the different service it offers. And what is the functional unit? Is a pilgrim per guest. What is functional unit? The functional unit is the unit that all the calculations are based on. So this is the goal. The boundaries. We are considering our study the hostel of Cádiz that I mentioned before, with these inputs like the electricity, the water, and the cleaning products. The accommodation service, it's involved the breakfast, laundry, heating, and finally the municipal waste. Okay, this study is called cradle to grave in the life cycle impact assessment methods. Why? Because we are considered since the inputs is the resources until the end of life of this process. these are not considered. So now, with all this, we are explaining the accurate inventory. Okay, the life cycle inventory is important because we need data in order to evaluate these impacts. So we studied the primary data about questionnaires to the hostel owners, and they give us information about water, electricity, breakfast, and cleaning production. And as well as the secondary data, it's the some emission factors, some factors, yes, that we need in order to evaluate, okay, to make the calculations in order to calculate the carbon footprint, sorry. So with all this, we have this table in order to show the inputs, outputs of our hostel. We have the breakfast, the laundry service, the waste, electricity, and water. Okay, and all the values are divided by the functional unit, okay? That is a pilgrim per guest night. So the year of reference is 2017. Why? Because it's the Jubilee year. It's one of the most famous years in this route, in this pilgrim route. The number of pilgrims considered were 650 pilgrims in the hostel, and the emission factors are considered in this database. What is these emission factors? We need to calculate the carbon footprint in order to evaluate the impacts. So how do we calculate this? We use the quantity, okay, is the data inventory, the amount per, multiplying by the emission factor. This emission factor is getting by the Econventativas, the literature, and the Gavi software. There are softwares specific of this area. So with all this, we are capable to get a carbon footprint, okay, of this hostel in the Camino Lebanese. Okay, so we go to the results, and we can see that, the carbon footprint of our hostel in the north of Cantabria, it's about 7.73 kilos CO2 equivalent per pilgrim overnight stay. So we see in this graph that the most contributor to this carbon footprint is this, okay, is the municipal waste, and the other is the electricity. Okay, the others is true that are not considered, but are lower than the municipal waste and electricity consumption. The municipal waste, it's about 3.5 kilos CO2 equivalent per pilgrim overnight stay. And the electricity is more or less 3 kilos of CO2. And the rest is the water, the breakfast, the food. Okay, so we can notice that these two points are so important to evaluate, because the majority of the impacts of this hostel is due to. Why municipal waste is so high? Because of the incineration process. It's true that when we are doing the calculation, we assume that all the waste is go to the incineration process. But it's true that in Spain, it is also used the landfill, the compost, and other type of processes. So these processes is not so a good point in order to evaluate this, because all the carbon footprint impacts are due to this. So what can we do? We can implement the 3 R's that consist on reduce, reuse, and recycle. And maybe it's important to take into account this and to consider another type of process of the management of this municipal waste, because the incineration process definitely is not a good point. So if we compare, the carbon footprint of our hostel with other hotels, not hostels, hotels in the literature, we can notice that our hostel under study has or present the lowest carbon footprint versus the other hotels. It's true that it's important to say that 3 more stages have been considered in these hotels. In these hotels are considered more stages than in our hostel under study. For example, fuels for thermal energy used in the hotel rooms, reception service, and the maintenance of the swimming pools. And these stages we don't consider in the hostel understand. This is true. So the difference between the three hotels depends on number of rooms, green areas, and number of swimming pools and laundry service. So this is why maybe one hotel is 5 stars, 4 stars, or 2 stars. These hotels, the more contributors to the impacts are the municipal waste is not as high as in the hostel, only vegetable oil waste and some municipal waste. But it's true that in these hotels, the municipal waste is not the most contributor. And it's true that electricity and fuel consumptions are the hotspots, okay? So with all this, we can say that the range of our carbon footprint of the hostels is an acceptable value because in comparison with the other type of accommodations, there's not so high. So conclusions, tourism is one of the most important industries in the global economy, but it's true that its development is essential to maintain the established economic system. But it's true that we have to study the environmental impacts because are so high, and this is a worry situation. Religious tourism is a fast-growing sector, it's true, but Camino Lebaniego in Cantabria is one of the more relevant events in Spain, so we can to study this type of tourism. One point is important to conclude. It's a novel study. Why? Because normally the typical studies are focusing on the hotels or apartments or another type of accommodation and not in hostel. And the hostel is not researching enough in the literature, and the tourism and the religious tourism also is not so common study in the literature. The carbon footprint of our case of study of our hostel, it's 7.73 kilos CO2 per functional unit, and the main hotspots of the study were the municipal waste and the electricity consumption. That is a typical point, but the municipal waste is a trend that they are the most contributor. So what measures we can implement? The introduction of strategies such as the circular economy, that is a famous term nowadays, but it's true that we can implement a circular economy. Why? Recycling, reusing, okay, in this type of tourism. And it's true that we have to improve this study. We can focus more and more life cycle impact assessment studies for hostels to take measures in order to reduce the impacts of this accommodation that are increasingly more and more. Okay, so I would like to present my acknowledgements. The research was funded by the Green Tour project. Okay, and I would like to thank also for my Department of Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering at the University of Cantabria, and concretely my DEPROS group, that for them it was possible this type of studies. So thank you for listening to me, and don't hesitate to, if you ask something, for me perfect, and I hope that you like my presentation and my case of study.